Welcome to the Diabetes Turnaround, the Masterclass series to learn the truth about reversing type 2 diabetes and discover simple, effective ways to lose weight, free yourself of chronic disease, and live a longer, healthier, more abundant life. I'm your host, Debbie Movsesian. I created this summit because I believe that we each have the power to write our own story about the health and the happiness that we want. I believe that no one should have to die early because they weren't taught the truth about food and disease. And I believe that anyone can live a life without medications and love the body that they're in. I brought experts from all aspects of health and wellness so that you can have every opportunity to create the health that you truly want. So let's make a deal. After this great, really informative interview today, commit to taking one step towards improving your health and do it today. So I'm really excited to welcome our special guest today, Dr. Colin Zhu. So thank you so much, Dr. Zhu, for being here and welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited and honored to be here.
Thank you. So to get us started today, do you mind sharing a little bit about your own personal story and what led you to do what you do now?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm originally from New Jersey, born and raised. I'm currently practicing in Los Angeles, California, and I'm a double board certified family practitioner and lifestyle medicine practitioner as well. And my story, I cannot tell my story without, talking about my mother and growing up within her upbringing. And she's a Chinese medical doctor. She practices traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbs, things like that. And she's been practicing for 4 decades now. And I've gotten the privilege to work in and out of her office growing up. And pretty much my entire world growing up was a lot about prevention, wellness, looking at the human body and the person in a very holistic approach. I learned a lot about compassion and empathy and really trying to understand the person behind, the symptoms, right? And she taught me a lot, taught me how to listen, taught me how to learn about, the patient's story. So I didn't come from a line of MDs. And so I went into medicine earlier to kind of meet, mesh East and West. But when I went into medical school, I found that there is a paucity of nutritional and lifestyle education. There was a 2010 national survey that surveyed all the medical schools, and only 27% of them actually required a nutritional course. From my personal experience, it was only 10 credit hours, and it was mainly just biochemistry. Having graduated from there, I graduated off cycle and to stay back to teach as a teaching assistant. And so I had 9 months to play with before I went into my family medicine residency. And what did I decide to do? Well, I decided that I wanted to learn more about food, not just nutrition. So I wanted to learn about how it's prepared, where it came from, how do you source it, actual real food. And I was blessed to have two parents that cooked, growing up. And so I was very familiar in and out of the kitchen. So I enrolled myself into culinary school, basically, and not just any culinary school where they, pound, the French, technique of sugar, fat, salt into you. I went into a more health-based, health-supportive, plant-based culinary school. And then from there, people asked me, do you do this as a hobby? And I said, no, it's very, purposeful. And I use it to enhance my actual, career. And so I use the culinary education to, do demonstrations, workshops, give talks like this, and speak around the country before COVID. And just basically enhancing people's understanding of food and how that plays into nutrition, into their own disease process. And so, that's how I got here.
Amazing. So can you tell us about what it means to be, board certified in lifestyle medicine?
Yeah, definitely. So there's an organization called the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. They've been around since 2003, 2004, relatively new organization, nonprofit. And basically their main focus is using evidence-based lifestyle approaches to prevent, treat, and reverse chronic lifestyle-related diseases. So what does that mean? They center around the 6 pillars: eating, healthfully, more towards a whole food, plant-based diet, physical, fitness, sleep, stress management, weight management, avoiding risky behaviors, and fostering relationships and community. So using that pillars, I've been involved with them since I was actually a resident, and just pretty much been with them since then. And they basically initiated their first board examination certification process in 2017. And that was done globally. So I was one of the first class of physicians to be board certified in lifestyle medicine.
That is so great. So can you talk about what is so different about incorporating these pillars and how we can prevent and reverse diseases as opposed to the typical Western medicine way of addressing these things?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The typical way is really, we live in a healthcare system that is very structured, right? And it's structured in a way where, we're kind of in and out, we are, put through numbers and RVUs and production and volume, things like that. And it's really about how many, how well you code and how many, medications, how, procedures, surgeries, you do things like that. It doesn't really do well in terms of how much time you spend with the patient. It doesn't really reward you so much so in terms of how well they, get better. Now, we're focusing more on quality improvement, and that's good. But I would argue to say it's not enough. If you look at the top 10, causes of death, a majority of them are lifestyle related. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, kidney disease, things like that. And we don't have, like I said, medical providers don't have enough education. Not only do they not have enough education, we are limited in time. So not enough education, and you don't have enough time to spend with them, to be able to, actually have a good, thorough conversation. And if you look at the studies of, and surveys of, providers, if they're confident in terms of administrating this, this kind of coaching or counseling or this information exchange, a lot of them aren't confident. And, that's very reasonable because they didn't get enough education. And, there needs to be, better role modeling, better accountability, things like that. And so there needs to be a multi-prong approach, to be able to, help out these lifestyle-related diseases. And this includes, a lot of, team members, like a dietitian, like a social worker, like the physician, an exercise physiologist, just so many, to be able to do this, as a team. But it's very rewarding. And what it does is that it cuts down on healthcare costs, it cuts down on medication costs, it addresses the actual root cause of disease. And that's why I went into it, because, my mom taught me, you don't just look at the signs and symptoms, you look at, what is causing the problem. And a great analogy that I teach my patients is that, when we administer medication and surgeries, what we're doing is, if there's an overflowing faucet, medication surgery, you're just mopping up the floor without turning off the faucet. And so, lifestyle medicine addresses turning off the faucet.
Yeah, I love that analogy because it's so simple, but yet you can visualize it so clearly. And it's such a big difference. So clearly, the way that most people are being treated for their diabetes is just trying to mop up the sugar on the floor, right? So can you talk about how different the approach from a lifestyle medicine perspective is when it comes to diabetes specific, type 2 diabetes specifically?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm sure you have a lot of, great speakers, talking about diabetes, and, we have more and more people being diagnosed, as diabetic every day. Every year it just increases in terms of, being diabetic, being pre-diabetic, obesity rates, our healthcare costs to diabetes are in the billions, and it's unsustainable. I think about maybe about 18 to 20% of our gross domestic product of our economy is attributed towards healthcare costs. And, it's not sustainable. It's already crushing our healthcare system. And we're also in a global pandemic, and it's, making it worse. So how it relates, how can we address diabetes is, we kind of have to, look at why diabetes is a problem, right? And by and large, and we're mostly referring to type 2 diabetes as opposed to type 1, is, it's a lifestyle related disease. And it's not just food related, not just how frequent you eat, the quality of what you're eating, but it's also, how little or how much you move, how much, stress is enduring on your body, what is surrounding you, whether you have people that are, fostering your best health, or you have people that are taking that away from you. And then, you have weight, you have all these, different things that, just continue to bring you down. So lifestyle medicine, is able to address, all these different factors, but it does take a, individual approach. You have to consider, obviously their diet history, but you also consider like, what are the behavior changes? Because I think that's really the core of how people get better or not get better. It's not as simple as a quick fix. I tell my patients every day that, how you got here is a, small choice that you make every single day over your lifetime. So you can understand that, it needs to make changes over the next days and weeks and months and years to be able to completely reverse your diabetes, which is very, very possible. But you'd be surprised, in as little as a few weeks, you can see dramatic changes when implemented well.
Yeah, it's so incredible when you hear the stories. And speaking of, do you have any specific case studies that you want to share with us so that people really can understand how powerful lifestyle medicine can be?
Yeah, definitely. I would say one of my earliest case studies was actually back in residency. This was around not too long ago. Let's just say under a decade. And basically, there was this one gentleman. He's been with my attending at the time, or professor at the time, for many, many years. Very stubborn guy. And he was in his late 50s, early 60s. He was obese. He had, I would probably say about, let's see, maybe close to like 40 inches of his abdominal waist circumference. And his A1Cs were in the 12s. And, my professor just kept counseling him, and, nothing was budging. He wasn't a smoker. He was married. He was a hard worker. He was retired at the time. And, he just had these, he was trying to improve his diet, but he wasn't really moving. So as a resident, when I was talking to him, I said that, I want you to just move. I don't need you doing a marathon, and I don't need you, lifting heavy weights in the gym, but I just need you to move in conjunction with what you're doing. He had a supportive spouse, which was also good. And then I worked with him for probably 2 to 3 months when we actually started to see some changes. He actually took up walking. And for those in the audience, with physical fitness, the best thing I tell people is do what you enjoy. And if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to have the motivation to continue it. You know what I'm saying? So, and you don't have to, do crazy stuff. The most cost effective right now is just a walk. There's a road, a sidewalk, there's a hiking trail. If you're in a coastal city, you're near a beach, there's just a lot of different ways to do this, and find an accountability partner. And so with him, we worked maybe in 6 to 8 weeks, we started seeing some changes. And I could tell that he got slimmer over time. I gave him some, diet recommendations, which is basically just to eat more plants. I don't recommend diets. I just tell them to eat more plants, because people, I meet people everywhere on the spectrum. I have people who are total, dead set meat eaters. And then on the opposite end, you have complete vegans. And so I have everyone in the middle, and I just tell them to make baby steps, and I just tell them to eat more plants, just to make it simple. And so with him, that's what he did. He actually, followed my recommendations, and he, after 6 weeks, we adjusted some medications, and after 2 to 3 months, I started to see a decline in his A1C. So he was in the 12s, and then he started coming down to like 10, 9. And then over 6 to 8 months, it started going down to, low 8s and then 7s, to the point where I actually had to de-prescribe him. Because a lot of complications when people start reversing diabetes is hypoglycemia, depending on what type of oral medication or insulin they're on. So, we have to be able to watch out and monitor very closely their medication. And so I had to de-prescribe him. And, what he also told me was that he felt better. His energy level went up. At the time, he had diabetic neuropathy, so he had a lot of tingling in his fingers and toes, and that started to go away. And then over a course of a year, I actually took him off of medication. And he was so adamant, and he fell in love with just walking and the diet changes, that he took it upon himself to literally walk 5 miles a day. And he probably dropped maybe 50 to 60 pounds in like a year. And this was just walking. It wasn't really like crazy, lifting or anything like that. And, we'll go into how a plant-based diet, the mechanisms of how it works, but he started to lose weight and he started to feel better. So.
Yeah. So before you go into those details, in your experience, how long does it typically take? Does it, I've heard from some people saying that it takes, weeks, and then others, up to a year, so what do you find is the typical time it takes for reversing diabetes, or for at least improving it and seeing a lower A1C?
Yeah. So everyone is going to be different, and it depends on many variables. It depends on your patient's motivation. It depends on how much of a learner they are. It depends on how often you bring them back for medical visits just to kind of check up on them. It depends on other members of your team and reinforcing their behavior changes from different angles. You could have a behavior health counselor. You could have a clinical psychologist that could, help them with this. You could have a registered dietitian. You could have a family practice, nurse practitioner, to kind of help you on the side. So it depends on so many different factors. And you just kind of work with them. But the fastest I've seen has been maybe like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. Where you start to see changes in their A1C and other, metrics. Their blood pressure starts to go down. Their cholesterol starts to go down. But for me, I try to see them, every 3 months, right? Those are routine follow-ups. But if I start to see that they're implementing their diet quicker, or they start to lose weight, then I start to see them more frequently. So I'll see them like maybe every 6 to 8 weeks, just so I can have a better handle on their medication, so their blood glucose doesn't drop too rapidly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So to go back to what you were saying, how is this possible? Something that has been taking, like you said, choice after choice through the years of building up and developing these diseases. How is it possible that it can be undone, reversed, turned around in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, how a plant-based diet works is, multifold. So basically I don't know if other speakers go into this, but I guess I'll just reinforce it.
Yeah.
But a plant-based diet is basically, it's typically centered around like 4 main groups. And plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based, diet is what I want to emphasize is, one, you're consuming, vegetables. Okay. So like sweet potatoes, mushrooms, onions, things like that, Brussels sprouts. You're consuming fruits, right? You're consuming legumes, right? Legumes could be like beans, peas, lentils, things like that. You're consuming whole grains, right? Whole grains is not, a cereal box. Whole grains is, brown rice, quinoa, amaranth, things like that. And, that is your main, foundation, right? You also have nuts and seeds, right? And then, we also recommend, supplementation in terms of like B12, D, And then this also means very, very minimal added vegetable oil or fat, right? And, what ends up happening is that, how this works is that your diet quality is very, very high. And so what that means is I'll teach you a concept called nutrient density versus calorie density. And, in our standard American diet, where it's more slanted towards, meat heavy, animal based heavy, processed foods, fried foods, takeouts, things like that, it's high in animal protein, high in fat, specifically saturated fat, trans fat, high in calories, high in sugar, okay, and high in salt. The combination of all that basically induces a lot of inflammation. And inflammation is kind of like the best way I can relate to people is think of your body like a car, and over your lifetime, you drive many cars. You lease a car, you buy a used car, you get a brand new car, and, you sell, things like that, right? And so, but your body, we only have one car. And that a car eventually rusts out, right? It oxidizes and, rusts out and we break down, right? People think of this as like arthritis and, like, oh, my back. But and a lot of that, a lot of things that we do in our lives, whether we eat, move, and our environment contributes to that stress. And that accelerated aging process along the way, And in terms of food, this means, how we eat as an American, as a Western, society is all those different things, like animal foods, animal-based foods, processed foods, refined foods, things like that. That adds towards inflammation. Now, I don't want to make it seem like inflammation is a bad thing. Inflammation helps us in terms of the healing process, right? But what I mean is more chronic inflammation. It's more of like almost like a bubbling of inflammation where it manifests as all these diseases that we have, including diabetes. And so what I tell people is, you decrease how much animal process and refined foods you have and start increasing your plant intake. And then all the other, pillars, pillars of health that we emphasize. So.
Yeah, and then you were talking about the nutrient density versus the calorie density. You want to finish that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So basically, in a plant-based diet, plants have higher amounts of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, polyphenols, fiber. Okay. So much more than animal-based foods, right? Animal-based foods have no fiber, right? So what is fiber? So fiber is basically the roughage. It's the indigestible, stuff. It's kind of like a scrub pad, when you are washing dishes. It helps to bulk up food or bulk up your stool, not bulk up food, bulk up stool. And, it makes for good poops, right? And, I say that facetiously, but I also don't say that facetiously because it's very, very important to have good poops every day. How you know you have enough good fiber in your diet is, you want to have, 1 to 2 good poops, right? Not diarrhea, not constipation, but good, bowel movements. And if you're not having that, then there's some sort of sluggishness, there's some sort of dysfunction in your gut, right? And so fiber is key. The average American consumes around 15 grams of fiber per day. And, some organizations recommend 25 up to 35. From a plant-based recommendation, we recommend 40 grams and up per day. And so going back to calorie and nutrient density, when, for 500 calories of for example, oil, right? It takes up very, very little of your stomach capacity, right? And it has no fiber. But when you eat 500 calories of vegetables and fruits, it literally takes up the entire stomach, if not more. And what it does is that it does amazing things. It increases your appetite, right? It increases satiety, and that allows you to consume less. You know what I'm saying? And the fiber helps helps with gut absorption. It helps with the gut wall, like the barrier, the wall function capabilities. And it helps you to digest well. Okay. And over time, it just, improves your glucose metabolism, and all that jazz. And not only the vitamins and minerals, but the antioxidants. Antioxidants help to, ward off the stress of the oxidation process, that inflammation, that we get in different ways. I mean, if you think about it, when you drink alcohol, you're drinking inflammation. When you're smoking, you're inhaling inflammation. And it's not rocket science that we know that, smoking is bad for us, and consuming excessive alcohol is bad for us as well. But I think Dr. Neil Bernard says it best, where, eating poorly is the new smoking, where you're consuming, inflammation. And so you have to be, very, very careful. Nutrient density means that, on a plant-based diet, you are nutrient rich. You know what I'm saying? You're getting your optimal nutrition based off of what I said. When you're eating more of a standard American diet, you're more calorie, dense and nutrient poor. So what you want to do is go towards, more nutrient dense foods. And that's, what I said, in a plant-based, diet.
So do you have like very specific recommendations that you would give to someone with type 2 diabetes versus, someone else that you're trying to prevent other chronic diseases? Or is it just the same plan can really benefit everyone?
I smile and chuckle to myself, because that's the beauty of it, is that the same plan actually benefits, everyone, So think about it like this. So going back to animal-based foods, right? So what are you consuming more? You're consuming more saturated fat, trans fat. And what it does is that people historically, and as not necessarily like a misconception, but people think that you're eating more sugar. I mean, Debbie, when your patients come to you, diabetics that come to you, they say like, "Oh, doc, what do I need to do? Get rid of my sweets and get rid of sugary foods and get rid of sweet foods," right? That's a very common things, right? And then I'll get better, right? But that's actually not the case. When you actually study the science behind it, is that you are consuming a lot more fat, right? That's coming from, animal fats processed, right? We, eat a lot of takeout, fried foods, things like that. It's fried and prepared in high oils, that basically you're consuming. And what it does is that it plugs up the liver. It plugs up our muscle cells, and it, expands our adipose, tissue. And adipose is basically fat tissue, right? So the biggest example is, the fat around your belly is the most obvious, right? And so those three things, what it does is that it disrupts the reasons why those are important, especially the liver and the muscle cells, is that, when you eat something, what it does is that, it gets broken down to glucose finally. And then your pancreas, which is the organ that secretes insulin. So think of it like glucose is passengers, and the pancreas is secreting insulin, basically like taxi cabs or Ubers or Lyfts, right? And so, their whole job of Ubers and Lyfts is to shuttle passengers to their destination. And the destination is liver and muscle cells, right? This is how we get energy to be able to process and move our bodies and think and live, right? And so when you're consuming more animal-based foods, processed foods, things that are high in that kind of fat, what you're doing is that you're plugging up the actual cells with fat. And this disrupts the signaling, for the insulin. And what it does over time is that it creates insulin resistance, because the body thinks that, oh, there's enough energy in my system because I have fat. Why do I need any more glucose? And so it stops, spitting out, you have a overproduction of insulin, and then, but the reception of the insulin to, the Ubers and Lyfts trying to get the passengers, they're not linking. And so what ends up happening is that you have a lot of sugar in your bloodstream, and it's going nowhere. And you have a lot of fat that's plugging up your liver, your muscle cells, and making your fat cells getting bigger. And the three things in combination are just detrimental. And not only does it create insulin resistance and ultimately leads to diabetes, but it increases obesity. It increases heart disease, vascular disease, peripheral artery disease, and it plugs up your liver, so you end up having a fatty liver. You know what I'm saying? So going back to your point, a plant-based recommendation actually, addresses all that stuff. So it's no longer a pill for an ill. You know what I'm saying? It's not a Lipitor just for your cholesterol. It's not a, metoprolol for your blood pressure. It's something that addresses, so many different things. And that's why it's so beautiful, because it addresses the root cause, right? It addresses turning off that faucet.
Yes. And I really am so glad that you said that and mentioned all of these other ways that it prevents all, like, heart disease and fatty liver and all those things. And I really want to emphasize that, because, and it's going to be a very common theme throughout this whole series, because there are still a lot of people out there promoting the exact opposite, like the keto diet. And so that when people recommend the keto diet to people, they say you'll lose weight and you can lower your glucose. And yes, that may happen, but at what cost? And is it addressing all of these other things? And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that the plant-based nutrition really addresses all of these things that people should really be, caring about. So.
Yeah, definitely. And not only that is that, in a keto diet, for example, there you can, lose weight, right? And, there's actually studies that show that, diabetes does get better. But the cost of it is that, it's high in fat and it's high in protein. And most of the time that's coming from animal protein, right? And so why is animal protein, detrimental, is because not only does it have the saturated fat and the trans fat, but it also has something called heme iron. And heme iron, comes from only, animal protein. And what it does is that it's actually more of a pro-oxidant. And what that means is that it induces oxidative stress. What that means is it increases inflammation, right? And then not only that, it has also something called branch change amino acids. And that also, disrupts, the beta cell function of the pancreas, which is basically what spits out the insulin, all right? And then also, you have something called nitrates and nitrosamines, right, from the processed meats, the cured meats, the bacon, the deli meats, things like that. And that has also a carcinogenic effect. Many people don't know this, but the World Health Organization, they did a task force around 2015, and they basically classified processed meats as a class 1 carcinogen and red meat as a class 2A carcinogen. And I don't know if you know this, but guess what else is a class 1 carcinogen?
You tell us.
Asbestos,
Oh,
okay, alcohol, and smoking. So basically, processed meats is in the same class as those compounds. And so, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know why there's no warning labels on these things, but, you have, the World Health Organization, classifying this. And so it's very, it's hard. It's hard. The food industry is very powerful, just like the tobacco industry. We are inundated with, social media, TV ads, magazine ads. There's fast food everywhere. If you look in the supermarket, you don't know which way to go. So it can be very daunting, and that's totally understandable. The best way is finding a healthcare provider or team that is very learned, very educated, knows what they're doing, and they focus more on, eating plant-based. And that takes some research. Not everyone does. Like I said, we lack the education, we also lack the time. So it's very important to find, like working, for example, like with Debbie or with me or someone else. There's actually, let me see if I got this correct, there's a web resource called plantbased docs.org or plantbaseddoctors.org. And there you could find a database of practitioners. It's not just doctors, it's nurse practitioners. You have RDs in there, you have coaches in there as well, that are plant-based, and it's a nationwide search directory. So that's one way you could look at it. Another resource you can go to is the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, or lifestylemedicine.org, and you can find other providers there as well. A third great resource is the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM.org, and that is led by Dr. Neil Barnard, and he's been a very, very long time pioneer in plant-based and lifestyle, medicine. And he actually has a book about reversing diabetes that's been out for many years already. So.
Yep. Yep. So you already answered my question that was going to be what's at least one thing, one simple step that people can take, and it's find someone that is going to support you in what we're talking about in this summit, right? So
Yeah, definitely. I would also add, in terms of like nutritionfacts.org was founded and started by Michael Greger, MD, and he is phenomenal. He's like one of my, lifestyle medicine heroes. And he basically scoured the entire National Library of Congress, pretty much the oldest and largest body of scientific research on nutrition. And he basically distills all that into bite-sized videos, and he puts it out on his website for free. He has a book called How Not to Die, which I would strongly recommend reading. You could, listen, you can read, Kindle, whatever. Another great resource is 21daykickstart.org, which is also started by PCRM, and it's a free online program, to help you step by step in terms of how to get on the path, and it's available in multiple languages as well.
And then do you have something that you're offering to our listeners as well?
Yeah, so basically all these different resources, I've compiled a nice kind of like quick start guide, that I've made for myself or made for you guys actually for healthy living. And it's usually just like 2 or 3, it's usually like, very nominal fees. And I will give that to your audience members, and I'll provide a link for you to be able. And you can find me on chefdoczu.com. So CHEFDOC, Z as in zebra, ZHU.com. And there you'll find a lot of free articles, resources, and, I have a lot of stuff there. So, and I also run a podcast and I've written a book. So, there's a lot of great stuff out there. It's really about finding good resources. And I know we can be very inundated with all these different things, and, coming to the summit like this and, meeting great people, that's one of the best ways to be able to take back your health. So.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise and obviously your passion. Do you have any last final thoughts for our audience?
Final thoughts would be, number one, get back into the kitchen. That is one of the greatest, first steps. Even if you don't go plant-based, getting back into the kitchen and preparing your own food is, very paramount, because what's going into your food. I say to my patients that, when you eat out or you go out, you're outsourcing your food. And, we've already learned that it's so important to eat good quality food. And so you don't know what they're preparing for you. So if you can get back into the kitchen, I don't care what you do, pick up a recipe book, go on YouTube, like, I don't care what you do. Just start back going into the kitchen, picking up, a knife, picking up, a good set of utensils, pots, pans, cook with someone, right? Have family dinners, reinforce those relationships. And, now that we're in a global pandemic, it creates more opportunities to do that, so, the sky's the limit in terms of taking back your health. And, it's never too late to start, as long as you start.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. And for everyone tuning in, I want to thank you for being here. It obviously means that you are ready to get serious about taking control of your health. And so I hope that you find this and all of the other interviews very valuable, and really take something and run with it. And you can really turn around your health. So continue to join us. Tomorrow there'll be another interview. And until next time, choose health. Bye.
Bye.